I have stopped here in Wichita Falls, Texas. Wichita Falls has got a really delightful little downtown. Over to the left of me, you see a 5-track railroad siding, which kind of tells you approximately 100 years ago the magnitude of this place. Wichita Falls grew up and grew up quickly. It was founded, as it's named, on a fall. Falls have a few advantages. One of that is when you get up to the falls, you can't be in a ship anymore. There's no way to navigate that. So you got to take all your stuff off the ship and go around, which means that you need a bunch of laborers wherever the falls are. It means that your goods are switching from being on boats to being on ground, initially getting moved by horses and stuff and later railroads. But the falls is also an opportunity. It is motive power because falling water can be used to turn wheels and to power a society. And so places like Wichita Falls, which is decidedly in the middle of the country, we're close to the Texas-Oklahoma border today, grew up around these natural features. Now Wichita Falls grew mostly extremely quickly after the railroad first arrived because the railroads opened up markets. Chicago was a huge rail hub and a huge population hub, which was founded and then within several decades reached 100,000 and soon thereafter 1 million within 50 years, if I recall correctly, of its founding, which is a more impressive amount of growth than any American city really before or since. The closest would be maybe Las Vegas. And railroads opened up markets that made all these little boom towns, tiny little Chicagos, wherever they may lie. And one of these places was Wichita Falls. Wichita Falls' claim to fame, much like Fort Worth, Kansas City, was folks would drive cattle to the nearest railhead from the huge barren west where there wasn't much that you could do. I know that this looks pretty green and verdant, but you go out west of here and it begins to get a lot drier, and it's not enough to support rain-fed agriculture. But you can ranch a lot of cattle, and then you had your stereotypical John Wayne cowboy folks. Point of note, cowboys were day laborers. They were almost exclusively Hispanic or not white. A lot of them were freedmen who had left the rest of the South and found, there was still a degree of discrimination, but discrimination's always a bit more navigable if you can make some money, and they spent a large amount of time alone out in the raising cattle. Anyway, cattle were driven to the nearest railhead, and then the cowboys had several months typically of wages to spend out on the town, which is where the Fort Worth stockyards, which is now a popular going out district, came about, and where towns like Wichita Falls got to be as big and as quickly as they did. But I'm not here to talk about Wichita Falls' real growth and real development. I am here to talk about Wichita Falls as the story that was told to swindle some investors. Now behind me is a building with a rather dubious claim to fame. It is the world's tiniest skyscraper. Purportedly, the world's tiniest skyscraper was a grift. It was a way for some folks who were trading via correspondence over the telegraph lines that linked the railroad to New York and Boston and Chicago and to these financial markets to the booming metropolis of the West that was Wichita Falls. However, they conveyed the building's dimensions in inches. So this building, a paltry 4 stories, with rooms smaller than a 10-foot shipping container, in which I don't think you could park a single car in any of the floor area of the entire building's footprint. This raised the modern equivalent of tens of millions of dollars from backers who actually were delivered what they wanted, or what they were promised, but not what they wanted. Because this skyscraper is, and I didn't look up numbers, so I'm going to spitball it. This skyscraper, were it in feet, would be the tallest building between Dallas and Los Angeles when built. It's a large building for a small town, but if I turn around, you can see that there have been in similar period, much larger buildings built. This was, more than anything, a scheme. And to the best of my knowledge, they got away with it because at no point did they actually commit any form of fraud. Folks who were looking at the building plan just assumed that whoever drew up the plans put an extra apostrophe after the dimensions. So they didn't think that they were buying inches of building, but feet. The building almost got demolished back in the day because it's kind of useless. I mean, no building's truly useless, but let's just take a look at this. So this is a standard 36-inch door. Notice that the 36-inch door takes up nearly a quarter of the width of the building. And notice that the building is only 4 stories tall, and if I walk the length of the building, it's about as long as maybe a parking space. Today it's used for art studios, which famously can go in virtually any kind of space, and I believe that the artists don't actually have to pay like market rent. I think that this is kind of used to seed an artistic community in Wichita Falls. But it was worth pulling off the highway to see just how important it is, if you're going to be an investor, to do your due diligence. Because sometimes you think you're ordering feet and you get delivered inches.